Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 68. Henneb ambled over to the rest of the camp. A large bonfire greeted him. Vassen was speaking, her shrill voice like an iron poker deep in the coals. She held the gazes of the other men and women. They watched in rapt silence as she continued in venomous tones. Henneb hurried to join them, warming his hands preemptively. Dolaran stood a ways back, behind Vassen. He glowered when he saw Henneb arrive without Kellen in tow. Henneb glared back at the other man. He had done what he could. The man had been as immobile as a stone, with half the emotion. If Dolaran wasn't family, he would have killed the man long ago. But family was all he had left, even if he hated him. Still, Dolaran shared his view that the others were weaklings to be used. Suppressing a laugh, he sauntered up to the group and elbowed for room to feel warmth of the fire. "How dare he take those women back unscathed!" Vassen screamed. "They deserve to die for what they did to our brave men and women. They should burn for what they did. Look into your hearts and you will know it to be true." Vassen, wife of Ranald's right-hand man Gennarl, had buried her husband earlier this evening. She had a terrible anger that welled up in her and threatened to completely consume her. Her grief had been twisted terribly, and now all she sought was vengeance. She looked into the faces of the others in turn, daring them to call her words false. She bit off each word with the fierceness of a wild animal. Rage stormed in her like an inferno. Dolaran had told her to rouse the anger in the others. If she wanted vengeance, they were the ones she would have to convince. She wanted to tear the limb from each of the survivors. How could they have lived when her Gennarl lay dead? God had forsaken her. She eyed the heavens in reproach. She felt grief beyond anything. If she stopped for even a moment, she would drown in it. The molten anger possessed her like an angry spirit who had taken hold of her senses. She had long since ceased caring. "They killed my Arlene, too! Now our children will be without a mother! What am I supposed to do now?" One of the men looked shocked by his own grief and anger. He cast his eyes deep into the flames of the fire. Another voice cried out, then another. Dolaran smiled in the darkness. This had almost been too easy. But now, Kellen and his spawn would get what was coming to them. Dolaran would make sure of that. A pity that Henneb hadn't managed to draw the man away. As the effects of the drink were beginning to fade, Dolaran let himself be taken up in the crowd. Time to become one of them. Inside, he giggled with glee. "Don't forget they killed the captain in cold blood. I saw Ranald die, crushed cruelly beneath the wheel and axle." Dolaran's heavy voice boomed over the rest of the chorus of angry voices. Vassen turned to him, holding her arm out to him, as if to welcome him. "Yes! Do not forget they murdered our leader! For that they must pay with their lives. We will let no man or woman stand in our way. Are you with me?" Vassen's thin voice struck a high note above the din. Slowly, one by one, they gave their assent. It was only what you could expect. They were just normal men and women, faced with a terrible situation. More than anything, they needed a scapegoat. "Don't let that miserable bastard Kellen stand between us and the outsiders. He let them live. Can we really trust a man who would side with our enemies?" Dolaran's voice was heavy with scorn. "I believe he chose them over us, because he thinks he and his are better than we are. Will you stand by and allow that under the ever-watching sky?" Grim nods from the men shadowed their dark thoughts. Many held weapons now, even the women. Vassen had whipped them into a killing frenzy. Dolaran had only to direct them now. "Don't let that stinking coward live another day here in our camp. Drive them out! We must burn them out!" Grabbing a long piece of wood, he lit the end of the hot coals of the fire and brandished it like a torch. Pointing towards Kellen's tents, Dolaran bellowed them onwards.